Good evening, my fellow growth-minded founders. I am so excited to have you here tonight for Scale Smart Live. I am your host tonight, Taja M. I'm CEO and founder of OpsIQ, a new operational enablement platform that will come alongside and help you as you are preparing for major growth in 2026. And so we are so delighted to be here with you tonight. A little bit about OpsIQ. One, I'd like for you to head over to OpsIQ.biz to learn more, and more importantly, to join our Founder Circles wait list. We actually have a wait list of those that are wanting to be early adapters to the platform as they are trying to strategically plan for their 2026. But more importantly, this is a three-pronged approach of supporting you full circle throughout your operations. One, it will have a very exhaustive library of supportive documentation, SOPs, different toolkits to help you process through those areas where you might be experiencing some of those clog wheels, as you might say, right? Number two is a curated C-suite of advisors that are going to work with you within the platform on a monthly basis, giving you best practices in areas that you might be having some additional exposure to or want to shore up, right? And then last is a real-time dashboard that'll pull all things, aggregate them all in tightly so that you can see exactly where your business is progressing as you go. So get on that Founder Circle wait list so that you can get into the platform as we look to launch January 15th. All right. But tonight I'm so excited because I'm sure many of you, like I, are looking at what is happening in the economy right now, what is happening in our landscape, and trying to figure out what will this mean for my business, for those that work alongside of me in my team dynamic as we try to face forward in 2026 and beyond. And I am thrilled to have someone here tonight, Ryan Sutton, who has experience in these change management areas and where these opportunities and flows happen, right? He will be able to give us some more insights. He also has a lot of experience in the M&A space. So if you are looking to have an exit strategy, know what that might mean to your business as you are looking forward to that exit. This is that type of advisor you would want to have alongside of you. So I welcome tonight, Ryan. Glad to have you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Taja, for the introduction. Hi, everybody.
Absolutely. Share more about you and your business, Pillar and Compass.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for that. Yeah, so hi, everybody. Ryan Sutton. Been in HR, to give a little bit of my background, been in human resources and leadership for about 23 years now. It's the only thing I've ever known and done in my professional life. Most recently, prior to founding my own company, it's called Pillar and Compass HR Advisors. I was a VP of HR for Stanley Black & Decker. I had responsibility for M&A activity for Stanley for many years, and also as the HR lead supporting for a time the Craftsman brand portfolio, but many of you are probably familiar with, one of those iconic brands, along with global marketing and global finance for a while. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. So like I said, he comes with a depth of knowledge, and tonight we're going to really dial in on an area that you saw an acronym for it, VUCA. Talk to me, Ryan. Let's kind of define what that is as we look to our bigger topic for tonight.
Yeah, VUCA. It's one of my favorite acronyms to use these days. I was introduced to it probably 5 or 6 years ago. It's kind of caught fire. So VUCA, VUCA, it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it was used really to kind of sum up, this massive change environment. And oftentimes VUCA is, sometimes it is rooted in something that we are doing to ourselves, something that we're trying to drive a change or whatever it may be. And far more often, VUCA is rooted in something that's actually being, inflicted upon us as leaderships. It's a change in the environment. It's, many of the things that you mentioned, Taja, when you were doing the introduction. It's the landscape shifts and things like that net volatility and that uncertainty that you have to manage and lead through.
Yeah. And I think what's important and what we'll talk about in topics tonight is how your leadership as founders plays into this, where you should be finding yourself in the midst of this to move and mobilize your team dynamics, while also giving, that security for them to understand, where they are in the process and how it will help to move business forward. but that would be why it is so important at this time, right? That we already know we're going to be going into a midterm election year. There's going to be a lot of change possibly that will impact our businesses based on what happens and the outcome of that. But then again, to what I was stating before, if you're in the process of thinking of something that is majorly could be disruptive to the business, right? Being an exit plan, or there's a shift in ownership, or shift in higher management, the C-suite level. This is a great way to look at it from a strategic level. So let's talk about it. So let's talk about our first topic for tonight: the current landscape of the workplace. What are your thoughts here, Ryan, as it relates to what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, so volatility, the VUCA, it can be rooted in the macro. And so you have things that are in front of us, like you think of the common themes, that you see in the world today: AI, what's going to happen with artificial intelligence. You can already see, organizations that are adopting artificial intelligence, they're having to shift their labor around, and how are they going to leverage that? How are you going to maintain a competitive advantage? For small business owners, you have larger organizations that can tend to be a little bit ahead of the disruption curve. They have larger, pools and assets and things like that. So they're investing heavily in AI. And so how do smaller organizations compete with that? You have the political landscape, as you mentioned. You have tariff movement and uncertainty, immigration reform. So all of these macro shifts that can take shape and create tremendous amounts of disruption. I mean, you can see layoffs taking shape and things like that throughout the world, margin pressures that didn't exist last year. And, you have those things that can happen just within your own business, that kind of, the micro landscape. So you imagine volatility, you mentioned acquisitive movement. If you're being acquired, or if you are moving to acquire an organization, there are a few things in the business world that are more volatile or can create more disruption than that, than moving through an acquisition or implementing an ERP or trying to manage through a leadership change. So those are kind of the common themes that we see, along with what's happening in the macro, the broad environment.
Yeah. Where would you suggest a founder spends or focuses attention where they can see those macro areas playing out, so that they can, one, kind of get ahead or become more knowledgeable of what those impacts could be to their business? What would you suggest there?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, we, following trade associations and being involved, staying up front with leadership development and training, and making sure that you're just really trying to stay in tune. The trade association, the industry associations, they are really great about making sure that all of their partners and those members are ahead of that disruption curve, or at least are being called out. So if you want to keep pace with what's happening in your specific environment, that's where I would start. And the closer you are to it, the more you stay apprised of like what's happening. I mean, attend things like this, attend those opportunities, the training and development rhythms that those associations put out. I would encourage you to participate in that. And, with like anything with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, with VUCA at the table, leaders that are, and I can tell you this as a matter of truth and fact, I have lived this personally, leaders that are not prepared to lead through volatility, through this VUCA period of time, whatever creates it, the leaders that are prepared are going to win, where the leaders that don't prepare and take the time and invest in it, they're going to really struggle through that. And the other universal truth is lack of leadership through VUCA begets more VUCA. It kind of compounds upon itself. Naturally, you start to get into an environment where you're like, oh, well, I missed this thing, or I didn't communicate, or I didn't manage this mindset, or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden you've got a whole other problem, a whole other layer of volatility. So it's very, very important to stay in tune with what's happening, respond and react to it. And you'll be healthier by doing that, for sure, within your business.
Yeah. That's a very valid point. Hey, I want to shout out. I see Danita is here with us from Pennsylvania. So glad to have you. And then I saw a question in the comments. So if we can bring that back up. Oh, that's a good one. Are there specific indicators that signal a team is struggling with VUCA dynamics?
Oh, that is a good one. Yeah. So most often, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. You can spot it in how your team is responding and how you kind of see their mindsets play out in real life. What you will see in a volatile environment, you're going to see a lot of water cooler talk. You're going to see a lot of negative chatter. You're going to see rumor mills. You're going to see a lot of worry. Oftentimes employees start to kind of clam up. You might even see, all workers have a certain level, I call it discretionary effort, where you see an employee that used to put forth a lot of discretionary effort, and this ties directly into engagement. And you start to see them detract away from how they normally would behave. That's a sign that something's up. And if you can make a connection between that behavior and a specific factor that's inflicting that, changing their environment or whatever, oftentimes you will see it manifest in that. So even here in a little bit, we'll talk about mindset management and making sure that communication rhythms are strong and engagement is strong, because a lot of the time you'll see that. And candidly, you will see problems arise within the organization. Like I said, volatility begets more volatility. And so you will start to see things that pop up where, hey, I missed this, or I didn't see it. And then you'll have a whole other set of problems, and you'll start to see this compounding factor start to set in as well. That's a really good question. I think mostly you will see it in how your teams are responding and reacting, and the mindsets and the level of engagement and effort. And are they positive or are they negative?
Yeah. So we reference, looking to your trade organizations in those industry specifics. Are there other places that you would source or that you would consider, Ryan, as consistent resources to look to get a good temperature on what those micros could be?
Yeah, I would say, some of even the larger professional organizations, of course, we see it all the time in the news. I don't know how helpful it is to, see what's going on in the world in the news, and, all the wild swings and what's going on in the political and the tariff landscape and everything. But, just staying, eyes open, staying in tune, even myself, professional associations like the Society of Human Resource Management, I'm a SHRM member. And so I watch that very closely. I receive all kinds of updates from them on a regular basis. I attend rhythms that they have out there and training sessions and things like that to remain in tune with what's happening in the world and what's impacting the businesses that I would support.
Yeah. Well, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit maybe in Mind Shift, but like to your point, there's so many ebb and flows, and there's so many things that catch your attention. How do you bring balance to it, so that it doesn't impact the team, but that, if you trigger on one area, right, of what might be happening in that volatility, at least you keep the team from keeping it isolated as much as possible before it becomes disruptive, right, within your organization. So hopefully we'll be able to capture that. I know we saw another question here also, so I want to make sure we capture that again. How do you fix a negative change? So I think we'll talk about that here within our next brief topic or our subtopic. So why not? Let's go ahead and go to that subtopic. How to lead effectively through periods of workplace VUCA.
Yeah. We'll jump right into it. Yeah. So leading effectively through periods of VUCA, you have to recognize that you're in a period of VUCA, and it starts with defining where you set. And I'm going to back up just a little bit because I do have one more nugget of feedback that I want to share. Oftentimes, it is helpful if you want to kind of get a better feel of where you stand in that volatility landscape. Beyond what you're seeing in trade associations and that feedback, you also can be in tune with your own employee populations. What I always encourage people or leaders to lean into is find your influencers, find the people that are engaged, you know them, you trust them. They can be, great allies around the water cooler to kind of get a feel for what is the landscape in-house? What are we worried about? What are some of the volatility factors that are playing into it? What are people worried about? You can host focus groups and engagement surveys and things like that as well to kind of get eyes on. But your own employee population will be an excellent source of insight and knowledge into what's happening and what might be impacting you. So I like to go through 3 steps with leaders as I kind of coach them on how to lead through VUCA landscapes or transformative landscapes. And the first factor is you've got to prepare. I mean, it comes down to planning. The second factor, the second success factor would be how you communicate and how you manage the mindsets of your employee population. And then the final step is, of course, how you execute through it and respond and react to challenges. Like anything, when you start running water through a new pipe or something, like you're going to spring some leaks that you're going to have to plug. And so how well organizations and leaders stay in tune with that and establish rhythms to make sure that you're watching that, that's going to be very a powerful ally for you. So, but yeah, starting off on the front end of it, I always coach leaders to start by host a pre-morning, actually sit down and define what's ahead. Take a look at what is impacting you. What do you predict might impact you? Sit down and think about the stakeholders and actually go through a pre-mortem. We've all heard of post-mortem exercises where you go back and something harmed you and you go back with a team of people and you say, oh man, what was it that did this to me? And how do I avoid this in the future? That post-mortem environment. Really, in a change environment, what you want to do, especially the higher the volatility, the more important this is, what you want to do is get ahead of it. Sit down, have a leadership team, or maybe it's yourself or thought partners that you can find that you trust, trusted advisors. Sit down, predict what's ahead, and then sit down and think about the stakeholders. Who's going to care about this? How is it going to impact them? Who do we need to communicate with? Is this going to create disruption downstream? Who do I think will be aligned as a positive influencer? Who's going to have a neutral mindset? Who might my detractors be? And how powerful are those? So all of these things, sit down and actually spend time thinking of it. I know business leaders, they get very busy. We're all very busy people. But this is one of those things that investing a couple of hours, even strategic planning and change planning exercises on the front end, can save you 10 hours of future pain and suffering easily. And so, I would always encourage people, leaders, to host pre-mortem exercises. And a critical component is making sure that when you're leading through a change, you have to define the from and where you predict the to be. And sometimes, part of VUCA is uncertainty and ambiguity. So some of these things you're going to be managing through or shepherding your teams through periods where you don't even know the exact outcome. We saw this with tariffs. There were organizations that knew very clearly, okay, well, I think this is what's going to happen. We were sourcing from China or wherever, and we know that the cost of goods sold is going to go up because material is going to go up, and we had to plan for that. But then 2 months later, there's another trade deal and something has shifted again. So doing your best to sit down and really watch that landscape and predict how it's going to impact you, predict who will be impacted, and build resilience into your organization. So I want to pause there. I know I kind of threw a lot out.
No, this is good. And it kind of brings in a comment that Anthony, thank you, Anthony, for making this. Yeah, indicators that he sees is a shift from judgment to permission seeking. Leaders stop exercising discretion and start looking upward to experts or even internally, to your point, right, for a validation. How much of this should the leader, that founder, weigh in on in his discretion versus seeking that counsel?
Yeah, that's a great wisdom, Anthony. I mentioned trusted advisors, and that can be, it can be the people at your table. If you have a larger organization, you have other chief level leaders, good thought partners. It can be people that you are linked in with their professional organizations, through LinkedIn, whoever it is. Having knowledgeable people who really understand it in your corner is very powerful. I mean, they're exceptional allies, and they will help you really figure out what is the secret sauce that I need to cook up to make it through this challenging period. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think when you have those that are outside counsel, they might be exposed to a more broader worldly purview of this volatility, right? And so they might be able to express it in a diverse setting that might give you an advantage point, right?
Yes.
in having them at the table. So,
yeah.
But we appreciate that comment, Anthony, for sure. when we look at that leadership and how you broke it down in those three areas, right? The communication piece is critical. How extensive in that do you see it to be? Is that something, because, to your point, right? You're going to see how this plays out against your team in response
Yeah.
already. So how I mean, until you know for
Yeah.
certain what that is, where do you lead with that in communication?
Yeah. Communication, I think, is so, of course, planning, pre-mortem, and execution are critical, right? We know that. What I often see, and I see this a lot, I've worked on, I think, 19 acquisition deals. I've seen seen the entire thing, huge challenges, and where we didn't have great communication rhythms, and we had all these problems and low adoption, all the way through the ones that were just like spotless, all the way through high adoption of the change. A ton of it comes down to communication. What we know, and this is human nature, we're all wired. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but this is, based on my professionalism, garnered over the years, things I've seen in smart people. But, I think a lot of us are wired to be defensive, and we worry because about the things that will impact us. And so you have a landscape, you hear something on the news, or you see a change. Hey, we got acquired, or we're going through a change. AI, what's going to happen? Is my job secure? What's going to happen with my leadership? Am I going to like my leader? Is the culture of the organization that I know and love dearly? Is it going to change? Is it going to change for the better? Is it going to change for the worse? You have all of this stuff that just spins in people's minds, right? And oftentimes that mindset, if it runs uncontrolled, and people start naturally to formulate their own picture of what's going to happen. Oh my gosh, I see this is coming. It's coming to get me, and I'm going to go and leave because I'm worried about my job and my job security, or whatever it is. Other times the communication breakdown happens because they don't even know what the change there is that they're moving to. So they have to figure it out in their own head. They're watching the landscape and like, I think this is what's happening, but there's like lack of clarity. The 3 C's, ever critical, create crystal clarity wherever you can. If you want to lead through change, you have to do that. A lot of the time people in leadership roles, they don't take the time to make sure that they are creating crystal clarity and leading into those 3 C's. So naturally people will respond in their own way, and they'll have the water cooler talk, and maybe that's positive, but oftentimes it's negative because they're in a state of ambiguity and uncertainty and worry. And I think that the communication and mindset management is the most I would vote it, of the 3 groups, is the most critical. Unmanaged mindsets, negative mindsets, and this is especially true among leaders. We have probably all seen this, where you have a leader of people who is influential, maybe don't have really high professional maturity, and they have a hard time holding back their feelings. Or as leaders, it's important for us to champion the change, right? Everybody's looking to us to say, oh, should I be worried or should I not? And then all it takes is that supervisor, a manager, a leader, whoever, at whatever level, to have that negative thing that they say, or they don't respond correctly, to something, and that'll create a whole stream of detraction and worry that can be catastrophic. So there's a really great infographic I would encourage all of you to look up. It's called the Mood Meter. It was created by Dr. Mark Brackett. He was the leader of the Center of Emotional Intelligence for Yale. If you look it up, it's all over Google. And it really does a great job of highlighting the importance and power of the mindset. So you have the worst decisions that we tend to make as human beings are rooted in negative, concerned, below the line mindsets, like worry, I'm concerned, I'm stressed out, I'm tired, I'm angry, whatever that is. And then it kind of highlights how you have to, as a leader, move them to what we call, get them to the green. You do that by creating clarity. You do that by predicting what they're going to be worried about and then responding. You can't just let it fester and be quiet in the background. It's far better to stay ahead of the messaging, because then you have influence and control over how it's being messaged. Because certainly they will. Thanks, Layla. I see that the Mark Brackett, how we. Yep, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, you get the idea. That mindset management, that move to the green is ever critical, especially for leaders. And I would encourage you, if you have people who are trusted, they have the ear of the folks that are at the water cooler, whoever it is out there in the world, I would encourage you to lean on them, bring them in and say, hey, I know that you have the ear of everybody, here. I want to make sure that you're doing well. Like, get them armed. In an acquisitive environment, we often want to prepare the leaders and say, okay, you're going to have people that come to you and they're worried about something. They're going to be worried about, hey, are you going to do a reduction in force? Are you going to consolidate the market? Whatever it is, be ready to answer that and be ready to respond in a way that's healthy, that's going to create energy and positive feelings, get them to the green or keep them in the green, eliminate the worry. And then you're going to see very high change adoption from that point forward. But watch your detractors closely, predict who they will be, and watch it.
So this is a good point, Ryan, but there's this balance of, not speaking too soon without having some path of that clarity, right? So what do you do when you do see the negative responses taking shape and you haven't yet been able to get ahead of it to finalize what that response should be? What should a leader be doing in that case?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly times where we don't have the answers. And the best leaders, I think, are the ones that they're authentic. And sometimes it is okay to say, hey, I know that you're worried. This is what I know you're worried about. And as you can answer. But it's okay sometimes to say, we're focused on it. The most important thing is that the people feel like you care about them and that you're moving the needle forward, that you have their best interests at heart. So what I always encourage, when you don't have the answer, don't just sit back and be quiet and let them start to just continue to spiral and worry. That spiral will turn into a tornado before you know it. Stay in tune with them, commit to updates, commit to as much transparency as you possibly can, lead with authenticity, and just be there with them side by side. Like, look, I'm here with you. I care about you. I want you to win. I want you to feel good. I don't want you to feel worried about this. And to the very best of my ability, I'm going to capture that and I want to take that off of the plate for you. That's the best that any leader can do, really. And it has to be authentic. That is most important. There's nothing worse than a leader who is out of touch with the reality of what is happening. Be authentic. Don't go in as a cheerleader when there's the dumpster fire in the conference room, and be like, well, everything's really great and everything, and everybody's like, oh, that's so great, I'm not saying be negative. Of course, we need to be positive, create energy, but lead with authenticity, and that will go a really long way. Your employee population will pick up on falsehoods very easily and quickly, so, and then that becomes a part of the volatility. Like, oh, well, they're hiding something. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The thing too about communication is, and I oftentimes hear founders say, but I've said that, you have to say it to nauseam almost, consistently or repeatedly before they might even actually have it to click in their heads and get that aha moment, right?
Yeah.
Because again, to your point, they're going through a lot of emotional, internal scenarios themselves. How are they going to take care of the family? What does this mean for work? What is, so as consistently and as frequently as you can message that, the better off you will be. Don't think the one time in an email or in front of everybody is enough to cover. They definitely need to have that constantly repeated to them, especially when it is to come across authentically.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you stated. Yeah, absolutely. Great topic here. Let's talk about our next topic for tonight. Tips to influence change adoption through mindset management. You hit on this a little earlier, so how does that look?
I've got more. So one of the things we kind of touched upon earlier is it's about prediction. Everybody, when you announce something's happened or they see something that's coming up, a change, a period of volatility, the transformation that's going to happen, everybody forms an opinion. Everybody has a mindset starting point. And it's important that you are aware of that among your key stakeholders, especially. So, when mindset management, again, we already talked about the Mark Brackett piece of it, moving them to the green, creating that kind of peace and calm feeling as much to the degree that you can. That's important. But being in tune where their starting point is at is infinitely important. You're going to have three layers. You're going to have people that are going to feel great about the change. They're going to feel great about this, what's happening. And they see they've got a growth mindset maybe, and they're just rooted there, and they think, hey, all things good. You're going to have people that are wait and see type of people, neutral. They can swing both way. They're waiting to see how it unfolds. And those folks can also be influenced by the positive influencers as well. But it's really important to drive communication home with them and stay in tune with them and watch that so they don't become detractors. And then, of course, you're going to have your detractors. They're rooted in a negative mindset. These can be folks that have the highest degree of worry. The most dangerous people, because they are the ones that are actively rowing against the stream. While you are trying to inspire and create energy, your detractors are going to be working directly in stark contrast to that. And so sitting down and really having thoughtful conversation about who are your key stakeholders, who are your power influencers, good, neutral, or bad, where do they stand? And then really be thoughtful and pointed about how you manage through that with them. Have the right kind of conversation. If it's a positive, somebody you predict is going to be a positive influencer, they've got high influence among your employee population, they're trusted, and you think that they're going to be of a positive and growth mindset, figure out how you can use that to help create comfort, peace, and clarity with your employee population. For those that are neutral, you want to be focused on making sure they don't head down a negative path and detract, get their thought partnership, bring them into the fold. And, you can even start to move them into a positive influencers kind of state. But your detractors, watch them very closely. And oftentimes I encourage leaders to sit down and maybe even have a pre-announce, prior to an announcement of a change or something that's come up, sit down and kind of gauge somebody that you've predicted might be rooted in a negative mindset or have high concern. Try your best to kind of move them as, up to center. And that's just going to be how you do that is just going to depend very much upon what you know of that individual and what's their driver, what are their concerns. So having pointed conversation with them to kind of understand their worry, their landscape, or what, their starting point is. You can then formulate a plan, to kind of move them up back to center.
So. That's a good point. Let me ask this, Ryan. So we've talked about what are the external pressures, right, versus what are the internal pressures, be it an M&A or change of leadership internally. Are there nuances even in that mindset, that mind shift? One, because we can control the dialogue in the internal. Are there any other nuances that you would see that you say help in that mind shift, help in the communication or the delivery, indifference? And also in parallel to that, are there tools or resources that can be aggregated in support of what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, I would say being in tune with what a typical change adoption curve looks like is helpful. And this does toenail into the mindset piece of it. Typically when a change is announced, and maybe it's a challenge or it's going to create volatility or something that could be worrisome, a lot of the time it kind of starts with, it's almost like a reverse bill. It starts with denial, and then it moves down. Even some will move down into a state of resistance. And then from resistance, you kind of move over into, exploration. It's like, okay, well, now I'm at this point, I need to start thinking, if I'm going to stay here, I need to start thinking about, well, maybe this could work. Maybe this is, so you start to kind of get over to that other state of the disruption curve. And then you kind of move back up into a commitment. So being aware of where people are along the way, and not, I think one of the challenges with leaders is, we have to go into a large volatile environment and just recognize it for what it is. When you go and announce a big change, not even close to everybody is going to be like cheerleading, and super excited about it. A lot of the times they're going to be like in that state of denial, or they're going to be directly start contrast or in conflict with it. And they might even move down into that resistance state, where they're like, well, I see this a lot with changes that are, systems changes like ERPs. You're implementing a new ERP and you go and you announce like, well, we're going to move to a new, in human resources, a new payroll system. And like, well, I don't want to do that. It's, I don't want to have all these challenges. I want to relearn. I have to unlearn this. I have to relearn this way thing. And I don't want to do that. So you get down into that resistance and you're like, well, if I go anywhere else, I'm going to have to relearn a different system. It's going to be different. And I can see that this is not going away. And so I need to change my mindset and move away from resistance and move over into starting that acceptance curve where like, okay, well, I'll explore it. I might do some training and start to think, and like, I'll be watching very closely though, for holes in it, problems that come up that don't get taken care of. And then, moving over into acceptance and adoption. There is something that what I would say that's really important in that change curve process. I call it hypercare. That's a term we used at Stanley Black & Decker when we would close a large project. When we hit go, we moved to a state of hypercare where we were watching the adoption very closely. We were it has to be very quick response. So again, when you start running the water through the new pipes and those leaks start springing up, they're going to be popping up all over the place. And you have to have rhythms established to stay in tune with what's happening. And, C-suite level leaders, you're at the 90,000 foot level. Bring people in that are at the 5,000 foot level and have them tell you what's going on. What are the problems? Get into a rhythm where you're looking at it weekly. The faster that you can identify the points of friction and resolve those points of friction, you're gonna see a tremendous uptick in adoption of that change. Unmitigated problems, the ones that you're not even aware of because you didn't have those feedback rhythms, you didn't have that hypercare, that period of planned, really super fast response. Without all of that, you're going to see more volatility and more disruption downstream. And candidly, by doing that, establishing those rhythms, you're going to narrow your timeline to get to adoption and get to the end, of that. So yeah, that hypercare piece of it is that kind of that final critical step. Like when you flip that switch and you're going, whatever it is, make sure you're establishing those rhythms, collecting the feedback and being hyper responsive to them.
That's a good point. All right, let's take this big challenge on here. You've got a leader that is looking ahead at 2026, knows that they're going to have to right size their organization, knows that because of the right sizing of the organization, they might need to bring in some more automation, which would mean additional tech stack adaptation within the organization itself. And, the political climate of what is seen externally doesn't favor very well for the organization. They possibly rely heavily upon federal or governmental agency contracting in order to, be viable in the marketplace. When you have several different points of volatility or change happening all in a sudden place, new leadership coming in addition to that, how do you prioritize it? Or how do you bring balance in the focus of what you tackle first so that it doesn't cause total chaos within the business dynamic and that you can still move forward in doing business?
Yeah. Wow. That's a good one. Yeah. That's a lot. It's like that perfect storm, right? I think, so I'll start with the prioritization. I think making sure that you have the 3 C's when it comes to creating clarity around the from and the to. And then once you have that from and the to defined, I would sit down with smart people. And this is that diversity of perspective. Sit down with roundtable and sit down with people that know what's happening, know the industry, trusted advisors, and sit down and predict the impact that each of these things is going to have. Everything that we move forward with, it's going to require investment in energy. We only have finite amounts of energy, finite amounts of time, capital resources, and everything's going to vary tremendously in degree of impact, longevity. How long is it going to impact? Is it going to be a quick, short thing, or is it going to be some with a lot of lag and a lot of staying power? What do we predict will be most disruptive? What do we predict will be critical for future growth to remain competitive or to move the needle forward? And even at Stanley, we used to use a very calculated approach. When we had 10 products that we were doing, we had finite resources, and we would have 10 options to make different products and things like that, especially in the security industry. And we would often go through and we would score. We would round table and we would sit down and say, okay, 1 to 10, what's it going to cost to implement this? What's financial? What's the speed or time to execute this? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? How quickly can we, once we do execute, what's the longevity of it? Is it a product that's going to be disrupted in a year? Is it going to have 10 years of staying power? How critical is this product going to be to a future platform? Is it whatever that may be? Is it a new camera system that we're going to build and grow and it's going to net 10 years of opportunity downstream? And when you really go through and you thoughtfully look at those kind of buckets, it becomes very clear, surprisingly clear, what really needs to rise up to the top. And then you say, okay, I'm going to commit my resources here, my time, my energy, my money, whatever it is, and I'm going to go after this one thing. The challenge with the change environment, you mentioned a lot, is kind of that perfect storm. And the truth of it is, you may find yourself, the way you described, that's an environment that would be extremely challenging. What I would encourage in that type of an environment, you could prioritize to the best of your ability and allocate resources and energy and whatever communication rhythms and things like that to specific things. But you may find yourself in a position where you actually do need to kind of cut it, a little bit more evenly across the board. And so that's where I would encourage people that are in that you cannot do it alone. You have to have a village. So not beyond trusted advisors, trusted executors, bring the people in, get the village around you that you will need to drive this forward. You will not, as leaders, be able to be everything for everyone, and you will not be able to shepherd every single change like this. In a landscape like that, you will have to have number twos, number threes, people that you can delegate. Delegation is a powerful and critical skill of leaders to be effective, especially in hyper change environments where you have all of this activity going. You almost have to get yourself as a leader into a state where you have work stream leaders, challenge thought leaders that are taking on these different challenges because they all are impactful and all important, and get yourself at the top to where now you have rhythms in place where they're reporting on a regular basis what's happening. You have to have people close to those different centers of gravity that you can trust. So
yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah, absolutely. Would there be any other tools, resources that you would recommend when you are going either through those high change points or even the more moderate ones that leadership can lean on or pull into when needed, that you would recommend?
Yeah. I mean, and these are not really hard to come by. I have a change management toolkit. It goes through the entire, kind of forces you to look at the stakeholder analysis and helps you figure out like what's the secret sauce for different stakeholders. Communication toolkits are really helpful. So those are some resources that I lean on. There are associations of change management with all kinds of resources and tools. Of course, we have artificial intelligence. So nowadays you can always, plug some, hey, this is what's happened. I need a draft of the change management. Now it's never perfect. So of course you have to go back in and edit it and things like that. But, there are a tremendous amount of tools and resources that are out there in the world, and even associations that are out there in the world for support.
Awesome. This has been very helpful tonight, Ryan. As we look to close, are there any other helpful tips that you would recommend that we haven't expressed? Be it that, they're trying to forecast ahead of what could be that volatility, the VUCA, or be it that they're in the midst of, what their leadership impact would be in terms of the team or the mindset. Anything else that you think as we look to 2026 and what lies ahead that we might not have captured tonight?
I can't honestly think of anything. I just always remember Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will. Or if it can be a problem, it will be a problem. If it can happen, it will happen. So just going back to, being prepared and taking the time, no matter how busy you are, find the time, because you're probably still going to be too busy when the problems start to pop up, and then you're going to be behind. So invest that time, energy on the front end, stay ahead of the change and that curve of volatility and that change curve that we talked about. And you're gonna come out way ahead of others that do not. I've seen it in live action many, many, many times over. So,
wonderful.
My last little nugget.
Well, Ryan, I can't thank you enough for this very thought-provoking, supporting how we help these founders as they move forward. Yes, it is insightful information, Danita, as we look ahead to 2026. Thank you for coming and sharing your thought leadership on this topic with us tonight. And thank you to the audience that was here with us this evening. We hope that you found it helpful as you look to move your business forward in 2026. I thank you guys for being a part of what has been Scale Smart Live throughout 2025. And we hope that you have a wonderful holiday season, get a little rest in, right? And we look forward to seeing you again in 2026. Glad to have you guys here. Have a wonderful holiday.